Angular provides us with inputs to pass values to components. To define these, we use the input decorator on properties within the class. To pass data to a component, we can use an attribute with the same name as the input property and provide it with a string value. Alternatively, we can use the binding syntax if we want to pass in a variable or an expression. However, what if our inputs expect a number or a boolean or even an object? We can't pass a static value using an attribute, as this would pass it as a string instead of a number, and this could lead to bugs or unexpected behavior. The same is also true for boolean inputs or any other non-string input. The most common solution for this is to change the attributes into bindings, and then we can pass these static values in their correct types. However, unlike attributes, the Angular compiler will treat bindings as something that may change, and they will be checked as part of the change detection cycle, even if they are static values and will never actually change. Here is a simplified version of what the Angular compiler would output if we were to use bindings. The update block will be run every time change detection runs. As you can see, we are checking the values every time unnecessarily, because we know they will never change. If we were able to define them like attributes, it would look something like this instead. As you can see, the update block has now completely been removed, as we're only ever using static values. Luckily, there is a way we can achieve this in our components, and the Angular CDK comes with some great utilities to help simplify the process. Let's start by installing the Angular CDK package. We're going to take a simple progress bar component and add support for input coercion. This component has several inputs. It has a value input, which is a number, and that represents the current progress. We have a max input, which is also a number, and represents the maximum value the progress bar can represent. Lastly, we have a disabled input, which is a boolean and represents the disabled state of the component. Notice we have a getter to calculate the percentage based on the value and maximum value. If someone was to try and use attributes to give us the value and maximum value, this would be passed into strings and our calculation would not work, resulting in some unexpected behavior. The template for this component is fairly simple. However, you can see we apply a class based on the disabled input. We check directly against a true boolean value, so if disabled was the string true, this would not apply the class correctly, potentially causing some unexpected behavior. Our application is using this progress bar component with some static values being passed into it. However, this component doesn't yet support input coercion, so these have to be bindings rather than static values. Let's start by changing these to attributes instead of bindings. If you have strict mode enabled, you may see some console errors at this point, telling you that string is not assignable to a boolean or a number. The naive way to fix this would be to add string as a possible type for these inputs. However, this can cause problems in other parts of the code, for example here in our percentage getter. We also don't want to allow TypeScript code to set these inputs to string values. Only templates should be allowed to provide string values for these properties. Instead, we should start by defining private properties for all these inputs. We change the original inputs to setters. We then use the coercion utilities from the Angular CDK to ensure that the value provided to us is converted to the expected type. This way, if the value is provided as an attribute, the string will get converted to the appropriate type. Lastly, we can add getters for all these inputs. This will allow our component to continue working as it was previously. If you're running in strict mode, you may notice that we are still getting errors in our console. This is because our inputs are still defined as number and boolean types. What we really want is a way to tell Angular what types it is allowed to accept for each input inside a template, without having to change the types inside our component. Angular provides us with a way to do this. We can add static fields in our component class that are prefixed with ngAcceptInput type, followed by the name of the input you want to define the template type for. The CDK provides us with some types that we can use, such as number input and boolean input, These are essentially saying string or number, or string or boolean. Now if we check our console, we should get no errors. Progress bar should now work as expected. It should also update correctly when we change the attribute values.